The black man of the Nile, Dr. Josef Ben-Jochannan. So that Dr. Ben doesn't be interrupted, let me just make this announcement. There's a gray Plymouth, E5D345, and another one, I think GIE 91J, a black Jeep, Plymouth. They have to be moved so somebody can get out. So please do that, because when Dr. Ben starts, we don't want him to stop.
I would like to say to my brothers and sisters, Dinestele, I give you an Ethiopian greeting from most of the cultures that occupy that land. When Brother Brath make reference to my wife Gertrude, she was temporarily out of the room, so I think I will introduce you to her again. So with the real Mrs. Ben-Jochannan, please stand. I'm traveling tonight with a very good friend of mine, and I know most of you would be lost for word when I introduce him and his title. The Reverend Sam Brown is a friend of mine and a Baptist minister. Sam Brown. He's doing his stuff in the vineyards of Queens, way out in Long Island. And you know, being a friend of mine, he's catching hell in the pulpit. What I'm doing now, after 53 years, starting in 1939, isn't accidental, and at the same time, I did not plan it this way. I was warned by my father that what I was doing as a youngster could only result in one of two things. And my father then told me, you don't take a job if you're going to be a gambler. There is no successful gambler working. If you're a gambler, you must spend all of your time to understand the tricks and charnies of gambling. You can't waste time and working. Otherwise, you're fooling yourself. So when I started, didn't understand where I was going, I took a career of civil engineering. That hadn't given me what I was looking for in my inner self, and at the time I wasn't even conscious of it. I turned to anthropology, cultural anthropology. That still did not meet my need, and I went into Moorish history. None of these things satisfied my need, and then I went to my father's first profession, law. Neither of these things satisfied my inner need, but they gave me a preparation in order to fight what was to come way up the road. And so it is that I had a last qualification to make, and that was to decide whether I was going towards money or whether I was going towards a struggle. And probably at the time when I started, I probably was not too clear on which way I had to go. So like any other young man, there were times in my youth when I too saw the flashiness of a car and thought that it meant something other than transportation, clothing and everything else. And I made quite a few mistakes in those days. But things start to gel when I realized there was a sharp distinction between going towards wealth and going towards a peace of mind. And quite early I make the decision that sometimes you have to take the route of the peace of mind, but the peace of mind did not necessarily mean the comfort of not paining. To have the peace of mind meant to go to jail, it meant to be spat at and on, it meant to be shot fired to you, your car attacked, your person, and family problems. But the peace of mind came that while you were in jail, you could sleep, unless they were purposely at the time harassing you physically. And I had all of those experiences. The ultimate and last point of this came in the entire month of August with the Egyptian experience I had, because the Egyptian government and many of its officials anticipated my mind, though my actions did not give away my mind. The Egyptian government summarized, or members within it summarized, that my total behavior from 1939 until 1991 was because of my commitment to my people, the Nubians. And that they felt that anyone dedicated so to their people will probably do anything in that effort to free their people. And so when it was that the struggle came for an Arab Egyptian trying to wrest from me that dream I had in placing Nubia again to the world by establishing this Nubian festival, which may have sounded good and playful, pleasureful, and everything like that, a holiday in the stars, so to speak, that they saw in this a totally different thing, which it was. They saw in this an attempt to bring to the world, and on the world scale internationally, the Nubian people highlights as those of Egypt. True, they were. But the charges against me for how this was to come about was totally erroneous, and the persons who plotted this, in conjunction with international bodies, were fighting against me at that point, not as Josef Ben-Jochannan. I have been barred from countries before. I had been placed in jail by countries that had been escorted back to the airport by the head of state of St. Kitts, Bradshaw. So I had known all of these experiences and knew they would come from different sources for different reasons. But what was the primary reason that I had reached this point? So I never asked, why me? I never asked the question, I will never ask the question, why not me? For what I was engaged in doing and will be continuing to do when I return to Egypt on the 19th of October cannot be stopped. And someone asks, how you mean it can't be stopped? You're a human being, you could die like anybody else. Well, if I die, I will die either by a gun, a knife, or just calmly die in some black woman's hands. I mean, arms. What you know about that sort. But nevertheless, I will die. And someday must die, based upon what I'm seeing. But I will continue to the last of the breath to be struggling toward Nubia. And so with that, I've made it a possible that money never played an important part, though it is important. The pursuit of it is very difficult, and at times it makes it uneasy for me to perform what I have to perform. But what is it? In 1936, and then subsequently in 39, when I made my first move in terms of Egypt, then I started what happened to me in August. We expect that only when we do things momentarily in one day, the reaction to what we have done just a few minutes prior to what comes down on us, we feel is that the thing that actually we're paying for. No. What happened to me in August 1991 began in 1939, and this was the response to what I did then. Between 1939 and 1991, what happened was the intensity of what I had begun in 1939. And because I knew it, when I went to Papua New Guinea, arrived in Papua New Guinea with $19 in my pocket, not knowing where I'm going, it didn't bother me, because when I was assured that 99% of the population looked like me, I knew I didn't need more than $19. I didn't know I didn't need $19. Because I knew what I had to do to live among them people. I had certain skills. I had the skill of law, the skill of engineering, and the skill of historical research. And there's no way that I could make contact with anyone there and we could communicate that I would need bread to eat. Since it is that my objectivity was always the African people. When I was teaching at Columbia University, I'm going to go into history, but this is important to understand me. I was simultaneously lecturing 2 blocks from here, exactly, on the southwest corner of 125th Street, right in front of the chock full of nuts. I would come down from Teachers College, where I was teaching 2 courses, to 125th Street to the University of Hard Knocks. And there I took all kind of abuse because my language was not proper. I did not know to speak to my brothers and my sisters. I too spoke with long syllabic words. I was the epitome of a British house slave. All my words were so properly spoken, and sometimes I had to trouble over my accent and the words to get to my people who had not heard a word I was saying until I started to learn the word motherfucker. When I learned to say that and to speak it with all the strength and vigor, as against a gentleman who mates with his partner, I had no one to understand me. And then I learned something in the Christian church. I spoke the language of the people. Some of you can't stand it, of course, as the people, but for the first time I was able to communicate with all of my people, those in the big house and those on the plantation. Previous to that, I was communicating solely with the big house. And the big house could not hear me because what I had to say was not for the big house. What I had to say was for the audience here and the rest of the audience like you. I wanted to bring what I saw in Egypt to the average African man, woman, and child, because I know that what I had was a liberating device. I had seen my people sitting and praying for a wife or a husband, sitting and praying for a 4Oct or a Mercedes-Benz, sitting and praying for all kind of frivolous nonsense, carrying it to the door of the Lord and leaving it there on the doorstep, coming back 2 weeks later and there it still was on the doorstep. And I realized that the answer, though theosophy and religion has its value, it is not the way with it all. For I realized that the minister would be never, if going to the Lord in prayer was really the thing, hardly a minister would have been in the pulpit. I knew all that. I knew that what my people believed in was what Carter G. Woodson admonished us not to go in, because it resulted in what he said at that time, the miseducation of the Negro. Marcus Messiah Garvey, whose son is here with us, one of the two, was a man who I looked at with a reverence not less than my own biological father. And I remember in his teachings way down there when I grew up in the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, he asked the question, what is an education? For what purpose? He said, it's not necessarily what you take in. For more than often, you will have to let that same thing out. I'm paraphrasing, of course. And it had an impact on me. And what was the impact then? Was to have a knowledge, to know something, to see your people struggling for that knowledge, which is theirs, to see them being Pavlov eyes, like Pavlov dog, and not being able to recognize that we are going down the aisle. First thing was to make my people, to free them from the Adam and Eve syndrome, free them from the guilt feeling, guilt symptom of being responsible and something being diabolically wrong for having a child without a piece of paper from City Hall. Having them free from calling themselves such as black sheep of the family, when this should be the proud point of the black family, it was denigrating to the family. To speak of everything and be afraid of it, the blackness of the night. And there's more blackness than there is light. To be afraid of your own skin, and to be shocked by the mirror when the mirror revealed it. All these things I saw without coming out and speaking on the issue per se. It is at that time that I equally came to the United States and met with an older boy. You would not think that we were ever boys. I met with a fellow from Georgia, little Bubba Clark, a little bit older than I am. And so when we meet any place, I always have to give him first consideration. But we met in the Schomburg, and I see a lady sitting down right on my right-hand side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 7 rows back, who was a mentor. And we don't speak about mentors, but the mentors have the point in helping to mold us. And I was partly molded by this woman, Miss Hudson, sitting right there. Will you stand up, Miss Hudson? Take a bow, take a bow. No, take a bow, you gotta take a bow. Take a bow. I had to, because you claim how beautiful the Schomburg is, and that's what I'm talking about. What a beautiful place, what an intellectual place, everything about it. And of course, we give honor to Brother Otto Lanza Schomburg and others. But I am a living witness for the many, many nights till 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, coming back from meeting with that young lady there, going home by herself towards the Hudson River, trying to get what you now got there. So I think that the old building, at least the old building, should carry Gina Hudson's name. And let me go into what it is that was so revealing and changing in me as a young man, and subsequently now as an approaching old man. It was that which Garvey was speaking about, I had discovered. It was no longer theory when he said the tricolors of Africa, which you don't even use no more. You talk about liberation flag. Garvey never spoke anything about no liberation flag. It was the red, black, and green trimmed in gold. And when I went in the tombs and temples of Egypt and saw the red, black, and green, 5,000 years before Jesus, when I went there in tombs and saw red, white, and blue, also as another symbol in ancient Egypt. Having seen these also in Sudan and Ethiopia, I'm going up, back up country, up south. I then was shocked. A man who had himself not gone physically to any part of the African continent, but totally spiritual transmission. It is then that when I got in the tomb of Setaiwan, at the temple of Setaiwan, at a place called Abydos, and realized that our people had been using this place as a holy land. There was no God by the name of Jehovah yet when our people were using it as a holy land. Therefore, of course, there was no Abraham yet, and there was no Moses to lead anyone from any place yet. There was no Jerusalem. And of course, Jesus didn't exist. not on the tongue of anyone. No one knew the name. And it was the Holy Land of my people. And there was no Bethlehem. No Allah existed. And therefore no Muhammad ibn Abdullah. And therefore no Mecca. Not even Medina. And then I started to think beyond doing just the research. Another thing started to come to me, and another damning thing came to me was the concept of the Immaculate Conception. As I walked through that temple and stumbled into the room and looked and see an erected penis perpendicular to the body of the image of the person being there. And by that time, knowing to read enough to understand what was going on in this, I noticed it was the resurrection. And I thought for the longest while when I heard that the resurrection of Jesus was a spiritual resurrection. It has nothing to do with something physical. But here was a rite of Cyrus with both a spiritual and a physical resurrection. And the symbol of resurrection was the penis of a man that the ancient Africans were not afraid to use their sexual organ symbolically to express point. I had seen this in other temples as I looked at Goddess Mut, stripped naked, and the text saying, Goddess Nut, exposing heaven to the world, her vagina. And I had heard of the word heaven, and I was taught to look up in the sky, especially when the big clouds pass. I had been in heaven. I had come out of heaven one day on December 31st and didn't even know I'd been in heaven. Because everybody was telling me it's not there. I lay down with it. I had learned to even go back in it. And I was ashamed to know that millions of brothers couldn't recognize heaven, and that's why they were beating it with clubs, kicking heaven full of new birth. Couldn't even recognize heaven. And I'd even call the products of heaven bastard, illegitimate, and so forth. This kind of news had to be told, but who's going to listen? Who's going to listen when they are already reached the epitome of what my brother had said in the miseducation of the Negro? Further, as I examine the whole basis for our living, understanding the concept of spirituality, understanding for the first time that our people bring to the world the concept of a soul, but not only a soul, the concept of the law of balance, the law of opposites. That law was fundamental and never once could be upset. Our people had even carried into the concept of balance the law of opposite, and showed that just like we are seeing melanin today, our people had seen it way back there in the concept of balance. It was hard to put these things I was now seeing as my pick and shovel dug into the earth and the blisters came. There was no time to worry about the blisters because the information that was being revealed was something that I found to be my greatest difficulty. Because what now that I've got this Who am I going to tell that can understand me? Can I tell my mother? No. She was a midwife and should have, but her background, her training. Could I tell my father? No. Though he encouraged me, because neither of the two could understand because of the background. How now would I tell my people? I realized it. When I went to the street in Harlem, it was not the first time, because in Puerto Rico, I had gone to the street with Don Albizu Campo. I had been in jail in 1935 with the black shirts in Puerto Rico at the university. I had gone to the street to tell people whatever way, because I was not interested in the title intellectual. Today, when people condemn me for not being an intellectual of the PhD type, they think that they're bothering me. They don't. I've given up. I surrendered the name last Saturday before last at my lecture at First World. I gave it back. I turned it back. I don't need the damn thing. I didn't need it then. But I needed it. I couldn't go in certain places, my brother and sister. Hadn't I used that white man's certification, I would not have been able to get in. I no longer need it. But I refuse to use it on what I consider the epitome of the black man and particularly the black woman's value. Never did I put the PhD on my works, because I refuse to let the white man certify what I am doing. And thus I understand what Brother Chancellor evaded him. I understood because I've been there, and I understand the browning of my people, or the lightning of my people. I could look at my mother and see it. And I realized that I can't blame my people for their browning. Therefore, the light one among my people and the dark one among my people had to be treated equally, because they were not responsible for what happened to them by the Arab slave trade or the European slave trade. It is that, because of that, I was able to understand the invasion of the first part of Africa, and that is the northeast section of Africa, now called by some the Middle East. I understood what happened as the Hyksos, the first foreign people to come in.